Hello everyone and welcome to this issue of Anti-Life Reviews. I'm your new god, the Makaya. We're actually at the end of March. That's right, I made all of my videos on time for once. Who would believe it? But we finish up looking at controversial comic book writer Warren Ellis. We'll be looking at Iron Man Series 4, Issues 1 through 6 that cover the Extremis storyline. So let's see some domestic terrorism in action. And who are the writers and artists on this comic? Well, the writer is Warren Ellis. As I mentioned, Mr. Ellis is controversial at best in some circles. I've covered that before to some extent, but he is a decent to very good comic writer, as I have displayed here this month, with Next Wave, Red, Planetary, Transmetropolitan, Anna Mercury, and so much more under his belt, establishing him as someone who will go down in comic history for better or for worse. The artist on this is Adi Granov. His art, it's barren, it's empty. There's a reason he is mostly known for covers, because he can do action shots or posing, and those are great. Him having a character look badass standing around or having already acted, he gets it. But I've never been a fan of his cold, sterile inner pages, the few times that he's actually done it. Over to the story. Who is Iron Man? You all know who Iron Man is. I'm not going to explain that one. But we meet some generic-looking fellows who enter a building, injecting one of them, a boy named Malin, with something, and leave as he pukes black and freaks out. What was it they injected? Well, a super soldier-type formula called Extremis, invented at Future Farm by an Aldrich Killian and Maya Hansen. Well, Aldrich kills himself, so Maya contacts Tony Stark, who she had a previous relationship with, to help her personally and professionally. The old friends meet up and go see a Jerry Garcia, Gary Gygax-looking guru they both know named Sal. Sal talks about his disappointment with both of them, Tony with his military and weapons contracts and Maya with not being able to work up to her snuff. He also goes into a speech about psychedelics that relate to the Extremis. Speaking of Extremis, Malin is fine, and him and his buddies are attacking an FBI field office, and he is seemingly unstoppable. He can also breathe fire on a plethora of generic FBI people who all look like Stephen Graham. Well, this spurns Tony into the field, who finds Malin shockingly quickly, but Malin beats Iron Man down quickly and effectively. Instead of being taken to a hospital, or say Stark Industries, Tony is taken to Future Farm so he can be given the Extremis, but with some changes he, of course, has already thought of. Well, after 24 hours, Tony is fine, new and improved. He's now a cyberpath, able to control technology, cell phones, satellites, his Iron Man suit, etc. You get that hint. And he's ready for round 2, which he promptly wins and blows Malin's head off. He then finds out Maya is the one who sold the Extremis to the terrorist cell, hoping to have it face off against Iron Man so she could market it. She goes to jail. The end. So let's move on to the writing. I want to say first and foremost, this in no way feels like a Warren Ellis Iron Man comic. I firmly believe, if given some leeway, he could tell a pretty cool Iron Man story, and there were hints of some interesting things going on here. But it feels like an editorially mandated story with a big number 1 on it, a reasonably high-profile writer and an artist who was hot at the time to sell this comic. That's what it reads like in every conceivable way, honestly. But Tony is portrayed about as cliché as you can get here. Sad that he sold arms, despondent about his place in the world, the scientific community, etc. He's chastened by a journalist and by his friends and colleagues, all of which we only meet for the first time in this issue, so their opinion on Tony is not one we really have any reason to give any sort of shit about. Not to mention Maya, the one doing most of the chastising, is arrested as a criminal at the end, so yeah, her opinion definitely matters in this. He just feels very surface-level Tony, waiting for something to happen, and it doesn't make sense for him to want the Extremis anyways unless we just consider this to be the addict in him coming out. He got beat, so he instantly wants the drug to make him more powerful, a drug we don't know the long-term side effects of. Hell, we don't know the short-term side effects, as Malin had it now for like 2 days. He can't contact anyone to help with this. Maya mentions why not call the Avengers, since Malin is going to DC. Nope, addict Tony needs this rush all for himself, though that is never explored in any real depth. Speaking of no real depth, Malin and the Extremis. The Extremis is another off-brand super soldier formula that we've seen ad nauseum, and doesn't add much of anything here. Honestly, Tony's powers are not really explored to any real depth in this comic. or any that came out around this time. I was reading this series when it came out, and only notable thing I recall Tony doing with his powers is pulling the plug on a dying Happy Hogan. It doesn't get used to its full advantage in the upcoming Civil War, and it's gone during the Secret Invasion. So, meh, though I do like Sal's explanation of the original super soldier formula invented by Abraham Erskine for Steve Rogers as being a Hieronymus machine. Hieronymus. I should know how to say that, but got my tongue tangled there. A machine that doesn't make any sense, but it works. And that's perfect because no one can replicate the original super soldier formula properly. But I'll get more into Sal shortly. Malin, boy, his design, backstory, character was just about as generic as you could possibly think of. A white redneck survivalist whose parents were killed by the government. Okay. And they explored that about as little as humanly possible. There's a scene where he kills a girl who he is having a political disagreement with, but it's so shallow. Why not have him be more of a mysterious kind of serial killer who is wrecking FBI offices, but no one knows who he is, and is killing people he disagrees with who are like protesting or whatever. He gets his powers, kills some FBI people, is found out instantly, then does fuck all until Tony blows his head off. Okay. Now, it's hardly all negative. I think Tony was interesting enough for what little he actually has to do. I do like him talking about how he is surprised he used to be able to fit the Iron Man suit in a briefcase, as now it's so big and unwieldy because of all the improvements he has to have, that it has to be carted on by a team of people to different places. He's reasonably introspective enough, and we see his genius displayed offhandedly when he remaps the Extremis to suit him. Fine. Sal is pretty cool. Despite this being the first appearance, he talks about something that used to be near and dear to my heart, psychedelics. Now, it's a bit of a vain conversation, as I can hear Warren Ellis' self-insert in all this, but his opinions on psilocybin, DMT, LSD, all interesting enough as a conversation. He suggests psilocybin was used by early man hunters, which there is some evidence suggests that's truth, and how people have similar experiences on DMT, and how they can remap the human psyche and whatnot. It was cool enough, and fit into what was kind of the theme of the comic loosely. Maya was about as cookie cutter as you could get, sadly. Now to the art. I really have mixed feelings about this. The still shots on this are beautiful, like epic. We get those cool poses with Iron Man just being badass or landing or standing or whatever. And Tony in his original suit in a flashback was really cool. When we get action that has enough room to breathe, I mean pages and pages and panels to breathe, it's pretty badass. The last fight with Malin and Tony is a banger, with Tony looking incredibly cool. That's pretty much what we get with Audi. Cool, very cool, and comics do need more cool in them. Also, the cocoon blister thing that happens when you take the Extremis is very intense, almost horror-like in quality. I liked it and would love to see that used again somewhere, but the problem is, it's everything else. His conversation pieces, his normal action, and his faces, especially Tony when he's in the Iron Man suit, but has his visor up, are all ugly as shit. Everything just looks off, odd, sometimes off-model. Bodies are proportioned, like, really oddly. Faces are stretched and slightly distorted. It just doesn't work. There needs to be more action in these issues for the art to be effective, and it didn't get it. A comic is a symbiotic thing. The artist and the writer need to work together for it to work, and this just didn't hear in any way that could have really been compelling. So overall, you can read Extremis. It's more of an important Iron Man story than it is a good one. It was the loose base for Iron Man 3. It affected his own series in some minor ways. I don't know. It was fine. It wasn't badly written. It wasn't horribly drawn. There were positives to both. It was just kind of there. And that's about as much as I can say about it. So that was the last week of Warren Ellis month. What Iron Man suit is your favorite? I've always been partial to the Silver Centurion one myself. But let me know down below. Come back next week, where for the month of April, I'll be looking at the entirety of a series I loved when I was younger, where we look at Cable and Deadpool, starting with 3 story arcs, If Looks Could Kill, A Burnt Offering, and 30 Pieces. Yeah. Also, like, subscribe, add me on Instagram under DemonPeaks for Twin Peaks memes, and don't forget, I'm the only demon who loves you. Thank you, and goodbye.